Austin, welcome to the 20-something podcast.
Again, I'm Austin Pack. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, licensed physical therapist, strength conditioning specialist, Marine Corps veteran, and the owner of All Prime PT. Probably two things: just be good to people, just genuinely be good to people without really expecting them to give you the world back, and just be ready.
Austin, welcome to the 20-something podcast.
All right,
Thanks
you.
for being here. This is actually the first episode of the year, so
Oh wow, look at that!
you get the honor of
Privilege
that
to get to,
that first
bring it in.
episode. But I'll kind of have you tell everybody like what you do, who you
Yeah.
are, and then we'll jump in from there and
Yeah,
go back whatever which way to the beginning and talk about how you got to today.
for sure. Yeah. So thank you for having me again.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Once again, I'm Austin Pack. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, licensed physical therapist, strength conditioning specialist, Marine Corps veteran, and the owner of All Prime PT.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So I saw you launched that a year ago.
Yeah, pretty much. It would be this month would make a year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty wild to think that's already been a year.
Right.
Right. So
How long have you been a physical therapist for?
I've actually been practicing for 2 years. So,
Okay.
I'm still under that 5-year mark, I guess. But I've been fortunate to have some great mentors and people along the way and just great life experience too, from the military. So I
Yeah.
take a lot of that into it with me. But, yeah.
What's the 5-year mark?
Well, it's not really a mark. I just kind of use that as you've been
Right.
practicing for 5
Okay.
to 10 years. Usually when
Yeah.
people ask you, what's your experience as
Yeah.
XYZ or a physical therapist,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
people usually are
Okay.
there's usually those tenures, I guess, of when
Yeah.
you're kind of experienced and not
That
as
makes
experienced. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So take me back. How did we get here? You've been practicing for 2 years now.
Yeah.
You own your own business. You said you're a veteran. How did we come from wherever the beginning was
Yeah.
to now?
Yeah. So, growing up, I really wasn't sure what direction I was going to take in life. I didn't really have a lot of guidance in that aspect, but I did, a bunch of different things I was interested in, just different sports, never really committed to anything. I was also into music, just being a very interested person, open-minded as far as what I would want to do. And then after high school, I finally realized that, obviously the music thing was kind of my gig at the time. I'm a musician, so I play guitar. So it's kind of the route I wanted to take, and I still do implement my music work and whatnot. But as far as that goes, I went down the road of kind of business management.
Okay.
I found that I wanted to be in a position to help lead, to help serve. Those are kind of been things that have been instilled in me as a young age, is just to serve, just lead by example. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, follower of Jesus. So that's really big to me. So after that, after I graduated, I just decided, I had already had experience with a little bit of military in high school. So I was like, you know what, let me just go ahead and send it. I'm going to join. I'm 21, about to be 21. So let me go ahead and join and serve my country. I just felt called to do this. And I wanted a challenge. So I was like, let me join the Marine Corps. And then even further, I wanted to be an infantry in the Marine Corps. So that just kind of took me down this hole of realizing how much I valued health and wellness.
Okay.
And I did that 4 years, a couple deployments, team leader position, a lot of great opportunities. I was a marksmanship instructor, an advisor, great things. I really enjoyed it. And then I made the decision to get out of that and kind of go back to school once my time was up. But at the same time, I had a little girl at the time. She was 1. So I was away from her a lot with deployment. So that kind of pulled me away from that. But I made the choice to do that.
Right.
So once I did that and then got back here and went to USC Upstate, business management, continued that, wasn't sure about it. And I was like, hey, I'm over here working out, I'm competing, I'm doing stuff like that, getting immense physique competitions, stuff like that. So it just didn't stick with me, the whole management business world, even though that's what I ended up doing anyways. But the interests, I guess. So exercise science was kind of my next avenue. And that just, from there, it just kind of spiraled into strength conditioning, getting into personal training, people throwing, hey, have you looked into physical therapy? And then I had a couple injuries. So it's one thing led to another. Right. And, I would pray about it every now and again. I was out of touch with my, my spirituality then, and just not as close as I am now. But thank God I was doing that, because that did open doors for me, and taking that direction, and then seeing, a close family member go through a really bad injury, and then pass away ultimately because of it, just really kind of struck home.
Yeah.
And realized, man, I really want to help people in this capacity. And yeah, the rest was hit. I mean, it was a grind after that
Yeah.
because PT school is very competitive. If you
Yeah.
haven't heard, you know, it's just like anything else, but you really have to put the work in. So yeah,
Okay. How old are you?
I'm 34,
34.
34 and a half. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right after high school, you decided to join the Marine Corps?
No, so I did a 2-year degree.
Okay.
Because I was unsure
Okay.
if I was going to go the route of, like I said, I was actually looking to go to a college in Florida called Full Sail. This was music related.
Okay.
So it's
Josh.
Josh.
right
Yeah, I know
there. Yeah.
Josh. Yeah. It's actually, I just recently found out he went there.
Yeah.
Me and him will have a conversation about
Yeah.
this because I'm like, wow, I did not realize that. So I was looking into that.
Okay.
Crazy. But yeah, so, and then that, you know, then I went, and after I finished that,
Gotcha.
leading up to graduating, I signed up and yeah.
Okay. And then you were there for
4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you went to school.
USC Upstate,
USC
came
Upstate.
back 2016.
Gotcha.
Got done in 2018. Took about a year to finish some credits to apply to PT school because some credits I had to, you know, redo, or if it was too old, like, you know, 5+ years old, you have to redo it. And then,
Yeah.
just did all that for about a year. I moved to Greenville, actually. And that was my first time experiencing Greenville.
Cool.
Because I'm from Spartanburg, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so, and then PT school was 3 years, so
Yeah.
that was in Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So
Yeah.
did you, like when you went into PT school, did you have the intention of eventually owning your own business and being an entrepreneur, or what was kind of your thought process there?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like for sure, I definitely took on some leadership roles in my class president, stuff like that. Just had that in me, you know, to help out. But I also saw a side of it where, towards the end, at least of my degree, that I might not want to take the traditional route like a lot of PTs do, which there's nothing wrong with that. And I still do assist in some contract work with clinics like that. But I had this kind of fire within me that I didn't really want to let out yet because I wanted to build some time. I wanted to get some reps in. I wanted to wait till the right time, right?
Right.
And then as I learned, there's really no right time.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I had the resources at the time, about a year after school, and then I just decided to go ahead and start just kind of developing into that, you know, naming it and just figuring out how am I going to do this and where am I going to do it? Like, what's the model going to look like?
Right.
I definitely had the idea to do it. Just didn't know it was going to be so soon.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
what did you do in the year before starting your business?
Yeah, so I was finishing up. I did an internship about 4 months at a place called Exos.
Okay.
It's a human performance, very kind of like high-end performance place, you know, where you're integrated with PTs and strength coaches and registered dietitians, and they're all serving high-level athletes typically, right? So if you're not familiar with them, they serve, you know, like they do the NFL Combine there, you know, even stuff with MLB, Special Operations Military. I was in Florida when I did this. So that 4-month experience for me opened a door that I could see the possibility on what PT could be,
Right.
you know, outside of that, because they only have certain locations, right? So if I was to be granted the opportunity to work at a place like that, sure, right? But it's very limited. There's more PT places that are kind of the more traditional insurance places.
Right.
So I actually worked at a spot for about half a year during that time, that year that you're talking about. And so, yeah, that's what I did leading up to that December. And then that January last year is when I kind of launched it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so cool. What were like the steps that you had to take to get to the point where you're like, okay, I can go full force into this? Or did you kind of like ease into it and still have like that job while you launched it? Or did you just like full on launch it and jump into it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of both. I mean, I was still getting the pieces together while I was still working at the spot, just trying to figure out the legalities and stuff like that, you know, making connections, trying to build some ground, because I hadn't been in the area long enough as a PT to really establish trust with people who wanted to work with me and their injuries. But I did know people in the area, so I would do that in the meantime. And then, so January came and I just kind of launched it. Didn't really have a space I was in, right? Didn't have any real estate, you know, and I'm currently operating inside of a gym, you know, not too far from here, actually.
Oh, nice.
On not Pelham Road, Woodruff Road, sorry. But yeah, so I just had to piece it together as best as I could because it was kind of just me, and my wife helped a little bit, but yeah, so
Okay.
it was learning. I mean, I'm still learning, like
Right.
anybody, so
Right.
it's,
So before you were operating out of the gym, were you just like going to people or?
yeah, I did that maybe twice that I
Okay.
can remember. I had a couple of athletes come to me at
Okay.
our apartment downtown. We had some space, so I would actually utilize that space, and then there was a gym there too, so it worked out pretty good.
Gotcha.
But I was like, for me, it's not ideal. Like, I actually want to keep it separate from my home, which I ended up getting in a spot in Simpsonville, and that worked out for about 2 months or so. And then it's when I got into the space I'm in now,
Okay.
last April.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you kind of like rent out from the gym then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure it was a gym that aligned with, not even a gym, I'm going to call it facility, like a sports facility that aligns
okay.
with what I'm doing, right? So I enjoy working with people who like typically play a sport or compete in some capacity, and also first responder population. Like, I've worked with firefighters, any military veterans. That's kind of like my little, I guess, niche,
Yeah.
if you want to call it. But yeah, so I had to make sure, hey, it was a good fit. I was a good fit. I want to make sure, I'm a good person to be in the space. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So what is your business centered around? Like, what's like the mission? What's the objective? Who do you like? You work with athletes, first responders, and then like what's like people are coming to you for injury prevention or rehab, or like what does all of that entail?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all just based off of the individual, really. I mean, at the end of the day, I want to be able to continue to create and evolve this practice to where it can really have athletes thriving and understanding their body better in injury and out of injury, to help prevent those injuries that could happen, that could have been avoided,
Gotcha.
right? So a lot of that's just based on principles, foundations, and just implementation. But trust is at the center of it all. I want to make sure that the trust is there, and that, they're just trusting in the process, because it's going to be a little different from your traditional PT.
Right.
And there's many PTs out here that would agree with me who are doing what I'm doing or have done what I've done, who can see those differences.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's like there's so many, but you just want to make sure that you're providing that quality care, giving that person what they need, and finding out if that person is the right fit for you and you are for them.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, but with my military background, it does definitely give me a leg up on working with first responders in the military, because I've been there, put my body through it, and I've had a lot of injuries. So so I definitely bring that rapport too. I just want to keep it authentic. But look, I know, I get it. Like, I actually understand what you're going through.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the differences between what you do and like regular PT, where is that like line? Because I have done so much PT.
You've had so much PT. Yeah.
I was an athlete. I was always
What'd you
injured.
play?
Sorry, mom and dad. Softball, golf, and I was a competitive figure skater, which
Nice.
broke a lot of bones for me.
Yeah.
But like regular PT, I feel was just kind of like because it was a requirement. Like,
Right,
I never
yeah.
felt like it. I mean, all of those injuries were under age 17, so my body kind of bounced back. But like, what is the difference between like me going to the hospital clinic and getting on the leg press and like what you do?
Yeah. No, I get that. I definitely understand it. I've been there too. And hats off, because that's a lot to juggle different sports at once. You know what I mean? Yeah, for sure. But so the lowest common denominator would be just the insurance. At the end of the day, it's that simple. From the PT that I'm doing now, I could do it to a capacity if I did accept certain insurances.
Okay.
However, it would still then take away from that type of care that you're trying to deliver.
Right.
Because of the legalities of insurance. Like, there's no way to get around that. They want to see a certain amount of, people in the door or whatnot, depending on how big the place is, right? Because they're not really getting reimbursed a lot per client.
Gotcha.
That's the issue. It is a money issue, and it's unfortunate, but everybody's got to get paid, right? So to keep it short, it's just, versus what I do, what I enjoy doing, and versus the insurance side, which can be a little bit more limiting. It's really just that, because if you're kind of like private sector or at a network or cash PT, they're all the same. If you're doing that, well, then you're dealing with people's money straight up, and that's the money they're giving that person, whether it's in payments or whether it's HSA, FSA, like savings account.
Right.
but the insurance isn't really covering a lot unless you have really good insurance who will reimburse you. Now, I have worked with some athletes who have that option. They're like, yeah, we'll cover all out-of-network costs. You just have to provide us, the person has to give us their license number, all this stuff, insurance documentation, and then they can make it happen. But it's just being able to spend that quality time with that person, not feel so rushed.
Yeah.
Have really good, like meaningful movements. You
Yeah.
have to assess the person every time. You have to reassess them. Okay, how's your hamstring flexibility looking today? Or how's that ankle looking compared to last time? Let me measure it. All right, let's do a couple tests, see if it's still lax in that joint, if we need to do more, like dry needling to break up some of the restrictions in the area. So yeah, there's really, it can get crazy, but that's the simple separation there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you do different things like the dry needling and like those different types of therapies.
Yeah, like scraping, joint mobilizations. I do, deep, I guess you can call it like a deep tissue. We don't really call it like a massage, but like almost like an active release where you can actually release the muscle through passive range of motion. It's pretty nice, very therapeutic. And yeah, I do all the other stuff really. Yeah.
What is scraping?
Oh, well, some people call it Graston, if you've heard of that.
I
Steel blading, it's like the metal, kind of like weird looking tools.
Okay.
And you basically just kind of rub it against the muscle, right?
Okay.
And you kind of, obviously want to put some type of
Yeah.
therapeutic massage cream on there so it's not too abrupt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really good for helping with just relaxation of a tight, super facilitated muscle, even like a little bit of inflammation in the area, but it can help for anything related
Very
and
cool.
restrictions. Yeah. So.
Awesome. I'm going to throw my roommate under the bus and send her too because she's a runner and she just threw her back out like a month ago.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I definitely understand back pain. I've had a lot and I treat a lot of that. So
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. It sucks.
So do you work with any specific athletes or is it like all sorts of athletes or do you find like there's a majority of one type of sport that comes to you more?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty flexible. Like I've worked with dancers, I've worked with volleyball,
Cool.
basketball, football, what else? MMA,
Cool.
combat sports. I really do enjoy that.
Nice.
Right. So even like I have some bodybuilders come in and work with me, right?
Okay.
I've been in that realm too a little bit, so I can understand that as well. Not that I need to
Right.
do it, just understand it, but it helps, right? So yeah, so it's a little bit of everything. And I consider myself more of like a cross training type athlete because I enjoy different sports.
Yeah.
Swimming, biking, hiking, running, anything like obstacle courses, stuff like that, or just traditional functional strength training. Like I've done all that. So
That's
it's
cool.
just really cool that I can, I just kind of like preach. I practice what I preach. It's just like second nature to me. So I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
But it helps me because then people see that and they're like, okay, cool. Like I can, relate something to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you train as well? You said you do something with like strength and conditioning.
Oh yeah, so I'm certified through the NSCA, Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist, which is basically a certification. It's funny, I was actually going to make a post about this because a lot of people get confused on what's what. But this is basically a test you have to take, almost similar to my board exam for PT. It's pretty long, and you have to pass 2 sections to actually get the certification.
Okay.
And you have to have your bachelor's degree to take the test.
I see.
Yeah, so there's a lot of science behind it, but it goes so perfectly with PT and what I do with
Okay.
physical therapy because the foundations are so just perfect. They just mesh together so perfectly. And typically, if you have a PT who's doing a lot of strength work and they don't understand those fundamentals,
Right.
it can almost be like a disservice to that person trying to get the maximum quality care that they could get.
Gotcha.
Just because it's just fundamentals at the end of the day and just getting reps in,
Yeah. That's so cool.
But yeah, so it's a cool little thing to have. And it's when people see that, they're kind of like, oh, right. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strength and conditioning, like specialties and like coaching is a lot harder to like get into than I ever realized.
Yeah.
Like I considered going back to school and getting my master's and then
Really?
getting into strength and conditioning coaching.
Yeah.
Like I was going to do some internships at like Clemson and stuff.
That's great.
And like that certification alone that's great. Like the qualifications for that, I was like, oh, that's so much different than like just my personal training
Just going to
certificate
get-
or like my exercise science degree has nothing to do with that. Like
Right.
you need so much more. But I think that's important when you're working with athletes at like a higher level,
Yeah.
especially like collegiate and professional. Do you work with
100%.
different level at like what level ranges do you work with?
Yeah. So, I've like I said, I've worked with the whole spectrum, from just your every day, all the way up to, when I was at Exos, I had the privilege to work with, special operations military guys, which was great
That's so cool.
and women, because that just kind of was like, that got me amped up. I was
Yeah.
like, let's go, because I did a lot of that and I'm just,
Yeah.
loving it. But yeah, I mean, there was some NFL guys out there as well we worked with. So in the area, the pro athletes in this area are kind of few and far between.
Yeah.
And the spot I'm at, they work they work with pretty much the full spectrum, like from your youth all the way up to even pro,
Cool.
So I get an opportunity to kind of get to help them out as well. So
Yeah.
it's great because for me as a PT, when I'm looking through my lens as a physical therapist, I'm seeing so many similarities between your 10, 12-year-old all the way up to your high level performer, right? We're all human. Our bodies are going to be different in their own little ways, but there's patterns that are the same regardless of what you're going to do. And that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother talk. But I guess that comes back to when you ask me, what do I base everything off of?
Yeah.
But if we're talking from not so much of a value standpoint, but from an actual physical therapy standpoint, like a, strength conditioning standpoint, it's rotation, rotation of the spine and, just the hips and everything. That's the biggest game changer for a lot of people when I find that they lack a lot of that rotation in their hips or their low back or their, even their neck, stuff like that can really affect their performance and their strength patterns.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
That's really cool. What types of things do you do for injury prevention? Like if somebody came to you and they didn't necessarily have an injury, but they wanted to work towards strengthening or being more mobile so that they don't get an injury in their sport.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that too because that tells me the person really, they're like, all right, let's stay ready. I always say let's stay prime. It's called all prime PT. I say stay prime because it's stay ready. But yeah, so I actually have someone who came recently to me for that reason. She didn't have any injuries. I did the full performance evaluation on her. It takes about an hour or so. Head to toe, everything was pretty good. She had a really high score on her injury screen, and she just needed some new movements to integrate. Now, there was things to work on, right? But you have to get evaluated to know what to work on. Right. Right? Because if I just feel like, my hip's tight and I'm stretching my hip all the time, and it's not even my hip, it's actually my back and SI joint, right? So that's a whole different story. But so for her, we got her on a plan, and she's pretty much just kind of doing her own thing after she meets me, 1 to 2 times a month. And we go for 30 minutes. And we just go over certain movements that we've already went over and new ones to incorporate into her training. Gotcha. Not necessarily for her training, but just blend it in. And I use my app for them to just get the notification. All right, cool. I got to do this today. 8 reps. Cool. It's so easy. It's so convenient. Yeah. So, and then I also do injury prevention and mobility labs. Predominantly, I've been doing that for one fire department in Fountain Inn. Cool. And I did 2 shifts so far. I have one more shift to go where I come in, I present for about 30 minutes. We're talking about stuff. I'm demonstrating things. We break out, do an injury screen, give them their scores, and then we break out in a little circle, go over some movements, 5 movements, and we kind of recap about 2 hours total. So that's a little bit of what I've done for injury prevention work. Cool. Yeah. That's
awesome. So for first responders and athletes, are the foundations relatively similar for those movements? Or are they different?
Yeah, the foundations are always going to be for me, it's just there's like I said, the rotation, having having stability in one area versus this area being more mobile. For instance, I'll just use it for an example. The foot, the ankle foot. Yeah. Basically, what you want to look at is having a flexible foot, but a stable ankle. Okay. Right? Does that make sense? Because you say stable ankle, it makes sense because people roll their ankle a lot, right? Yeah. But if their foot is kind of stuck and they don't have a lot of good toe mobility and pliability in the bone structures and even the muscle strength in their foot, that's going to compensate up into the ankle. So coming back to the foundations for your first responders and your athletes, a lot of that's going to be pretty much the same. The only difference is going to be that someone like a first responder has to work under a lot more strenuous conditions when they're maybe fatigued, really fatigued, they just woke up and they're getting a call and they got to all of a sudden get their gear on and they got to head out the door. They haven't stretched or anything, right? Versus your athlete who has the time to typically warm up for that, prime their body, and then go do their. Yeah. So I would say that's a big difference there for sure. And then the mental side of it's a little different too. But foundations are pretty pretty similar. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
What's the most common injury you see?
Common injury? I'll say definitely low back, low back injuries, even related into the hip.
Really?
Yeah. And I'll say that's pretty accurate because literature shows that about almost 70% of people in America are dealing with some sort of low back pain or will deal with some low back pain in their life, right? And that's a lot. I mean, that's over half, and that's next to the shoulder. But yeah, it's pretty common that I see that. Like I might have someone come in with some knee things, like knee
I was
issues,
gonna guess knee,
right?
for athletes.
Yeah. No, that, and then a lot of non-contact stuff for the knee too. Your ACL stuff like that. And it all comes back to stability, right? And just being able to decelerate and appropriately accept that load and not, just give out in that moment. But yeah, so someone might come in for the knees thing and maybe that, man, like my low back has actually been an issue for a while, but I didn't think much of it.
Yeah.
But now I'm noticing it, right?
Okay.
So it's kind of cool
Makes
to see.
sense.
It's not cool, but it's like cool to understand how everything can affect another.
Yeah.
But you have to really experience it to see it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then
Yeah.
you know, but I'm sure you know because you.
Yeah. Like,
You definitely, you played three sports and all that.
fair share.
Yeah.
So with low back stuff, is it usually something from like prolonged stress to the back, or do you see a lot of like, oh, like I actually like physically like I compact from the back, or is it more like overuse?
Yeah, I'd say probably a mixture, but overuse more so.
Yeah.
Overuse, because what happens typically, I think, is that people move in like faulty patterns where they're not as optimal as they need to be in that movement. And over time, if they're doing that a lot, I mean, that's just essentially going to mess an area up or agitate an area, whether it's a disc or if it's actual muscle, or if it's even a ligament that's connected in the spine.
Right.
So it's just a matter of like teaching people how to get out of those habits, how to learn more about their body and control those positions in that moment, like whether they're doing a deadlift or whether they're doing like skater jumps, or if they're just, landing from, jumping up for a layup or something. Like it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
People can tweak their back just picking up, bending over to pick up their book bag, right?
Yeah.
But it comes back to what's been going on, right? Or how fatigued is that area? How weak is that area? But that comes back to testing.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm a firm believer in, just testing and knowing what we're looking at. So we're not just kind of like, just like shooting in the dark. We'll see what happens.
Works.
Yeah.
This worked for somebody else. Let's try it on.
Right. Now I will say there's sometimes where like you've done a lot and you just like, man, nothing's working for you right now. I'm like, yeah, that's what this person said. And this person said, I'm like, all right, well, here we go. We're just going to like, but yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess going back to like more of like the business side of things, as far as when you started out, how did you go about bringing on clientele and like building that up so this could actually be something that you sustain as your livelihood?
Oh, okay. I mean, that is definitely a tough part. I will say, like, just getting people who actually need the help, getting people who fit, what I'm doing as well. So I'm not just taking anybody. Okay. Because I definitely don't believe in that. Because I know so many PTs I can just refer to. I'm like, hey, you might need to go see them instead. But really, I've just been trying to keep the efforts and just stay getting out in the community, helping, trying to give back. Post a lot on social media just because it's just a way to give free education. I mean, essentially, whether people scroll past it or someone's like, oh, yo, I'm going to save that because it's actually good. So, stuff like that. I've gotten people that want to work with me just from that. Or at an event I did, whether it was at a gym or like a collaborated and partnered with different places around here, Restore and Supreme Nutrition and ISI, and like I said, the fire department and all these other places. So, I mean, it's just a handful of just getting out there and just showing people what I'm doing. At the end of the day, I mean, really, I just, try to keep it authentic,
Networking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, just having a community is everything.
Right.
And that's what I'm starting to learn a lot. I mean, I knew it because being in the Marine Corps, everything was about teamwork and communication. So, but coming out, that transition can be kind of weird. And you're like, all right, what do I do now? But, the more I've been going along and obviously through school, everything, I had to see the same people all the time, right, for 3 years. Just understanding, okay, community is needed, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur in business. Right. And just, keeping that open mind. Yeah. Yeah.
So is it just you, or do you have a team or anybody you work with?
No, it's just been me. I've just been grinding it out. I've not partnered up, but I've collabed with a couple other PTs and stuff like that because I do believe in that. And I do, I would enjoy having a team or, someone to work with because I do better. I don't want to say do better with that, but it helps, right? Especially just to kind of throw thoughts back and forth. But yeah, I mean, I've just been kind of trying to create the vision myself, because I do see it being a little bit different from what I've seen around me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not too like dialed in as far as like, I'm only going to see this type of person,
Right.
but because I believe in growth too. Like I want to be able to grow and like learn different ways to treat people and run the business. Right. But, just kind of creating those initial foundations just to help me steer the path, stay on the path, I guess. Yeah.
What made you decide to work out of a gym versus having your own space that's just specifically for you?
Well, a lot of it came to overhead.
Okay.
If I'm being honest, like, I mean, just what my business mentor taught me was like, all right, do you really need a space right now? Okay, cool. Could you get one? Yeah. I mean, do you have the money to pay for it and not like take out a loan or go? And I'm like, no. So I was like, well, what actually makes sense right now? So, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it's really great to have a mentor, be able to like, tell you that stuff. But yeah, just doing that. And, if I can just pay rent, or if I can, help out the athletes there for like pretty much free, or any type of trade-off that can help me just do what I need to do and not, do all this stuff just to then do what I need to do, but then have all this extra stuff I have to worry about, which is ultimately the goal for sure. I have a bigger vision for what I'd like to see here in the upstate, definitely. But I think, things got to marinate and take some time, obviously. But I'm definitely optimistic about it. But that's the biggest. That's the biggest reason. Yeah, for sure.
That makes sense, especially early on.
Yeah. So I had to keep it real. Keep it 100. Just like that's just keeping it real. But yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
But
shoot, I just lost my train of thought.
yeah.
Oh,
no,
you
I
said
do that too.
business mentor. Is that somebody you had beforehand, or did you kind of seek out a business mentor when you figured out that this was something you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, I think that was pretty much before. I was actually looking into a few different people, places, or businesses that do PT mentorship, specifically for PT businesses who are trying to get into a gym.
Cool.
There's places that have a model for that, right? So I was looking into it, found a guy. We clicked, went back and forth, and I was like, all right, I just need to do it. We've talked a lot, and you just invest, and then just kind of follow the plan. He helped me through that whole year. And
That's awesome.
yeah, I mean, I give a lot of credit to him for helping me kind of navigate, because he's done this before, right? And now he helps people like me do that, because he's kind of, understood the system a lot, trial and error for 5+ years, So it's a lot of times. So it's basically just like learning early on what and what not to do, or what maybe to do that's going to help you better than maybe doing this over here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say that that's definitely worth the time and investment to have that
100%.
mentorship? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Because it was like, looking back, I mean, just in that first year, I was like, I don't know what, I mean, I honestly don't know how I would have navigated it the way I did without him, without a mentor,
Right. What was it about your business mentorship that made you think like, all right, this is something like I'm going to trust this person and this is going to be something that they're really going to help me be successful in? Because I feel like I'm 24, people at my age, my generation, like a lot of us are trying to do stuff like that, but it's hard to know like, who do I trust on the internet, or like who do I trust from like these different like coaching standpoints, and what should I look for when trying to figure out who's going to help me create my business essentially?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, obviously doing your research, just kind of checking out, maybe you go on their website or something like that, or maybe you do like a little intro call and talk to them, or maybe talk to one of their other coaches they have if they do that. But that was pretty much it for me. Like I spoke to him, just with no cost. I just kind of felt his vibe out, and we just clicked, and, I was pretty straightforward. I was not holding anything back. I'm like, all right, cool. That sounds great. Right. Like all this stuff sounds cool, but you definitely, like, how does it work? Like, how do you do that?
Right.
So he had like courses laid out, he has like a whole thing on his website where you can go through these courses, and just seeing that, but also seeing that he's helped people prior to me. Now I didn't look to see that he helped 10,000 people and they all have, like 5-star reviews of, hey, I made, this much, or I gained this much confidence doing this. Like I just saw a couple, and it was more about just his character at the end of the day, because that was the biggest thing for me. So I didn't really go off of his social media. So I would just say, like, if you're going to look into doing that, make sure you just at least get to speak to them.
Yeah.
And like have a, just straight up like one-to-one with them, and be 100 about everything, and just see if it's the right fit. Because I think sometimes like a lot of people they just try, and it's good to try things out too, because then you have to kind of figure out, okay, well, what's going to be best and what's not going to be best. Like trial and error, it has to happen, right?
Right.
It's unfortunate, but it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, if you can just do that, I think that's the biggest thing is just, then sit back and all right, cool. Is this going to mesh well with my personality, like what I'm trying to do with my time, with my money, etc.
Okay.
Yeah.
What essentially does that teach you within that mentorship?
Yeah. It teaches me just more about myself, like more about things that I could do, within the business, just also as a PT, because he is a PT too. So that was another plus because he is a PT.
Yeah.
He's done this. So he has the understanding of what I'm looking at, but he also has understanding of that business side. So that just kind of helps teach me more like what I'm doing, like what things I could do, maybe things I could be better at, questions to even ask myself that I haven't thought to ask, because then he'll like pitch stuff to me. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. Like, how did I not think of that? That's crazy. Like, I mean, it's right there in front of me. He's like, yeah, man, it's all right. Like you get bogged down, you just look right over the easy stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So it just kind of teaches you more like self-awareness, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. Yeah.
Do they or with your stuff with him, learn about like the legal side of having a business and all of that jazz, like the paperwork and the licenses and all that stuff that you need?
Yeah. He actually, for my mentor, he actually had a course for that, just kind of taking you through like like a little simple lowdown. Like, honestly, I mean, he was even like, you can look at this, but then you can also go to ChatGPT and just type in, could you please type up everything I need to know for starting a business?
Right.
And it will literally just throw it out. I've done that. So like, and I keep that kind of on the side just to double check and make sure I got everything, which I do, but it's just easy, stuff like that, it helps though.
I just learned how to use ChatGPT, which is kind of embarrassing.
Hey, I learned about that last year. Believe it or not.
Just like a couple months ago.
Yeah, so I had I don't even think that was a thing when I was 24. Wait, was it? No, it's all.
I mean, it definitely wasn't a thing when I was 23, to me at least. It probably wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
No.
Yeah.
That would have been nice though. I feel like that part of everything is so intimidating for people wanting to start businesses.
Yeah.
Like with this podcast, I was like, what do I need? Like, how do I do this? How do I set this? What's an LLC? Do I need an accountant? Like, what are all of these things? But if that's something you can learn in a mentorship like that, I think that will draw a lot of people to be interested in that type of thing too.
Yeah, it helps. And then just, like you said, like to see someone else that has already done it, done something similar to your model. I mean, that's huge, because then you could be like, oh, cool. You don't want to like compare, but you at least get to see a framework and you're like, all right, cool. That's how they did it. They're here. They did this. Like it's possible. Right.
So kind of going a little bit back to something you said earlier, you talked a lot about like leadership and how that's always been something important to you. And you've been kind of called to lead. Was there like a turning point in your life where you like learned about that, or you like got thrown into something like that? Or can you kind of talk about like what that like looked like, and maybe if somebody is wanting to take a step towards being in a leadership position in their life, like what actions they could take, or like what they should be focusing on in that area, I guess?
I can think of a spot. So when it relates back to the Marine Corps, when I went to, we call it boot camp. You've heard of that, like basic training. Yeah. And Paris Island, South Carolina. And I took on a leadership role there very early on. And I was basically called the guide. That's what it's called in platoon, the guy who like basically like has to hold the flag and kind of stands at the front and everything. But it all came about because what my recruiter had told me, and I know this is kind of like, if some of my buddies heard me talking about this right now, they'll be like, bro, really? Like, you're going to talk about this? But yeah, I mean, legit. Like, it's legit. I was 21. And, like I was in the Marine Corps, like it's in boot camp, and they're not very nice to you, but it's for a reason, right? Yeah. So yeah, I was volunteering. I was putting myself out there. I knew my stuff. I was studying my knowledge prior to going to boot camp about the Marine Corps history, about your rifle, about, weapons conditions, all these different things that you should be knowing. So just knowing that stuff, being confident in it, being able to deliver, right? And then just being humble and just saying, hey, if somebody's got to do something, if someone's like, hey, can someone go do this? Who's going to go do it? Right. Just go do it. Like if someone needs help, just go help them. Right. Right. So that's kind of what really opened my eyes to that. And I take that my approach now. Like if someone needs even if a friend like breaks down, like if, obviously if they're like 4 hours away and I can't make it there in time, that's different. But,
Right.
just being that friend, being that person, like not even in the business, but like just that type of person to serve. And that comes a lot too, back to like, trusting in Jesus Christ and just, being led through that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, from like a life standpoint, that's kind of when I really saw that. And I was like, man, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then it carried over because then I graduated, top of the class, honor graduate.
Yeah.
Then I get to the fleet, right? And then where I'm actually doing my job and then getting ready to deploy, come back, and then I'm promoted to team leader.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I don't make it up. I just do it.
Right.
I don't make the stuff up. It's like I just do the work. I care. If I'm passionate about what I'm doing, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you can just fall into that position without even trying.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like what you said about like being humble
Yeah.
in that spot too. Like a lot of times you'll see people go into a leadership position or feel like they're that leader, but then it's like they're so their ego kind of grows with that leap, and then nobody likes that person.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's like different types of leadership, and
I've
I like
seen
what you said about
Yeah.
kind of being humble and just always be learning, and
Yeah.
then just being that, having that willingness to help others in that position. I think that's what makes a good leader from what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I would
Yeah.
agree because, like, life is learning. If we're not learning in life, I mean, what are we're just like stagnant. You know what I
Right.
mean? And just always remembering to check yourself and say, hey, first you have to follow, then you can lead. Like you can't just lead. You have to follow. You have to be a good listener, right? You have to be very like present in these moments to be able to show people you can lead and have that trust in them. So yeah, I mean, that's huge.
I like what you said. You have to follow. You can't just lead. You have to follow.
Yeah, you have to follow to lead, or you have to
like
be a
that.
great follower before you can lead. I mean,
Yeah.
there's different ways you could say it, but
Yeah.
someone told me that once. I don't know who that
I like
was,
that.
but maybe I think that was in the Marine Corps. Someone said that actually. But yeah,
I like that a lot. Yeah, because even like the greatest leaders or the people that you look up to, like they have somebody that they look up to and somebody
Right.
that they follow, and they're still like trying to get to the next level.
Yeah.
So even if like you're 21 and in a leadership position, that doesn't mean that you've made it.
that
to
you've
the
made
top.
it. Yeah. No, that's a great mindset to have. Like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So kind of looking back on your 20s, and like I guess things you've learned from then forward, what would you say is like the biggest lesson or just anything in that realm that you would tell somebody my age,
Yeah.
or advice you would give somebody in their 20s, or something that maybe stuck with you that kind of got you from everything you did up to now?
Yeah. I'd say probably two things. Just be good to people. Just generally be good to people without really expecting them to give you the world back. Whether that's serving or whatever it is. And just be ready. I mean, be ready can mean a lot of things, but if you're being good to people and you're staying ready, I mean, the opportunities when they come, you're ready to take them on. You know what I mean? And people see that. People see that you're ready. Like people see me on Instagram and they see me as a PT who's like working out and doing this stuff. But I do it naturally because I enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
And it brings me joy to do that. And then it brings me joy to help people and serve people, even outside of PT. If I'm just helping somebody at the grocery store, or even if it's like a homeless person who, obviously is like actually needing help, it could be anything really, but just that, just being good. Because I really didn't have that mindset in my 20s. It was more about just go, just get it done, just get after it. You know what I mean? And and then just figure it out. I mean, just kind of go with the flow, which is still good to go with the flow a little bit, but if you're staying ready in your actions, like with your business, and you have X, Y, and Z checked off, you got this ready, you don't have to have every little thing like in place, but if you're just ready, with stuff in the background, and, you're just, I don't know, ready to take on any opportunity, I guess, because then you're like, oh gosh, I didn't know they were actually going to want me to do that. Now I got to get all this stuff ready.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I've ran into that. I don't see people run into it. So it's kind of hard to show up if you're not really ready in that regard, whether it's physically or with the business or mentally. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I like that a lot. I feel like especially at a younger age that can happen so often that you're not ready because it hasn't happened to you yet, and you don't have that like belief instilled in you.
It's
like
tough.
So it's so hard to have the belief if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So then it's like the opportunity comes your way and you're like, well, I didn't think this was going to happen, and now I'm not ready. Where instead it's like, okay, it's something I want. I put in the work. I believe it's going to come. I'm going to be ready for whenever it comes. And then when it does, you're not like, oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah, yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah, I think we all have. I mean, hey, you know, like that's just some stuff I've learned. I'm definitely
Yeah.
still figuring out stuff myself and just life in general, right? You know, so
Yeah.
like 10 years from now, I'm in my 40s. It's like I still got a lot to learn then, right?
So
And
much.
and same for you. You're like
Yeah.
10 years, you're in your mid 30s. It's
Yeah.
like, but there's a lot you can learn in between then, and like you'll be the same person then, but you'll have so much more. We'll have so much more to offer. You know, God willing, you'll be in even like a better spot, like with
Yeah.
what you're doing in life, and just believing in the process. And like I
Right.
said, always being good to people.
Yeah.
Comes
Yeah.
back to that for me, but like that's just me, the message from
Yeah.
God that I just try to emit so people know that without me saying, you know, hey, I believe in Jesus. Like no, like I'm just a good person, and you know, try to live by that as much as I can
Yeah.
with what He wants. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. That feels like a really good tie to
It is.
everything.
I think so.
Okay, so for the people in the upstate area, how can they get in contact with you or work with you or follow you or find you? Like, where's all that info?
Yeah, so everything as of now is just All Prime PT. So
Okay.
the handle on IG, Facebook, what else? TikTok, if it's still not getting banned, but I think it is.
We don't know.
I'm barely on there that much, but like the other two, All Prime PT, the website, allprimept.com. And then I'm located by session only, so I'm not always there, but inside of the facility at PAP Sports,
Okay.
PAP Sports, as of now on Woodruff Road, across from, I'm trying to think where the Whataburger is, that new
Okay.
Whataburger they opened right there.
Okay,
You know?
yeah.
Like right in that area. The website's on my Instagram, but
Okay.
that's where my office is inside of.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right.
cool.
Well, I'll put all of that in like the description. So if anybody's interested in
Perfect.
checking you out, they can reach you. But thank you so much
Heck
for
yeah.
sharing all
That's
that.
been awesome.
That was
I appreciate
awesome.
it. That was a good time.